Hi, I'm John Danner.
And I'm Mark Coopersmith. John and I are the guys who wrote this book, The Other F Word: How Smart Leaders, Teams, and Entrepreneurs Put Failure to Work. The whole idea around this is to turn failure from a regret into a strategic resource. And of course, we do it from this context of teaching at UC Berkeley, Silicon Valley, innovation, entrepreneurship, et cetera. John, what's on tap for this week?
So I was going to suggest we do something a little different than we've done in the past. Usually we'll take one or two examples of failures and talk about them. But this time I was thinking, why don't we look at something that's common to many failures? And that is this whole issue of experimentation, whether intentional or not.
Yeah, so that's a really important topic. I mean, it's one that you and I spend a lot of time on, and it's both the concept of experimentation and it's the lexicon around experimentation. So before we jump right back to this, as John and I were preparing for this podcast, I brought up this newspaper article from the New York Times, and in it points out that Spencer Silver, who was 80, passed away over the last week or two. And Spencer Silver is famous for the guy who invented the Post-it note.
I'm rummaging in my office right now to see if I've got some samples. I usually do.
Oh yeah, here we are. Post-it notes right here.
And, oh, good. Okay. All right.
And actually, these are the original Post-it notes, not some of those cheap knockoffs. You know, the cheap knockoffs that get stuck on things? No, this is actually Spencer Silver's formulation. The story behind this, and then back to you, John, is that he was developing a new adhesive for the aerospace industry that was supposed to be able to be effective at all temperatures in space, zero gravity, whatever. And he found something that just actually wasn't nearly as adhesive as he thought it would be. And one of the problems was it never fully cured, but that turned out to be one of those crucial benefits. And John, do you want to take the story a little from here?
So this was a failure of an experiment that actually turned out to be a strategic masterstroke in the middle of an unintended consequence, basically.
But okay, there's a but attached to that. Let me take it for just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
From here, the but is, it took him a few years to figure out what to do with it. And it wasn't until he was collaborating with another one of his engineers that was focused on commercialization that they came up with this killer application for it. And that's in part because this other engineer who was trying to find applications used some paper treated with this adhesive to hold stickers in his hymn book for when he would sing in the church choir. And everybody in the church choir saw that and they said, where can we get some of that? And that's where that aha moment came from.
Maybe it's not an aha moment. Maybe it's a hallelujah moment, the hallelujah moment. So think about this for a second. You know, those of you who are watching with us, when Mark and I launched our first pilot class on The Other F Word, we made a point of asking our students to go out into different domains and try to understand how failure was dealt with in those particular contexts. And one of our MBA students decided to take on science and failure, and came back at the end of the semester with her scouting report. And she made an observation that I think Mark and I both wish we'd been smart enough to come up with on our own, but she was the author of this. She said, you know, here we are in business, and we never use the language that scientists use. Scientists talk about experiments all the time. And the minute you use the vocabulary of experiments, wholly apart from the discipline of experiments and the scientific method, et cetera, do you expect, when you hear the word experiment, that every experiment is going to succeed? And
no, of course not.
Yeah, and the answer of the entire class was no, we don't. But then think about what everything that we do in business tends to be, whether it's a new hire, a new team, a new product, a new strategy, a merger, an acquisition. They're all experiments. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. And if
John, what language do we use, though, to describe those?
This is our strategy. This is what's going to happen. This project's going to change the world. This product is going to find success. Our new invention is wonderful. It's going to work magically in the markets for which we designed it.
Right.
But in fact, underneath all those are assumptions that haven't yet been tested, hopes that haven't yet been realized, And that is the making of experiment. So I think one of our suggestions would be, think about starting to use the language of experiments in your own organization. Because if we were really being honest with one another, I think we'd admit that much of what we do, much of what we try in our organizations on a day-to-day basis are really well thought out, hopefully, but they are experiments. And they are likely, like most experiments, to lead to failure. But failure can lead to discovery, just as Mr. Silver found out to the benefit of 3M.
Well, and regardless, scientists or experiments have outcomes. And you may say successful or unsuccessful, but basically you have a hypothesis. This is what we think is going to happen. And regardless, we learn something from the outcome. And I think that's the takeaway. In fact, when John and I teach entrepreneurship, we use this language much more because a startup is a real-time business experiment. We don't know what's going to happen. We know we're going to be wrong in some of those assumptions. And that's why entrepreneurs very much embrace this scientific method when it comes to business process, products, go-to-market, and more.
So we wish you insightful experiments. Until we see you next time. So long.
Bye for now.